I just got to set the screen up. Give me a minute.
No worries. Why don't we do this in reverse? Anybody have any questions while they're setting it up? Yeah.
Did you ever get to be on set with your father?
Yeah, I was in Edward Scissorhands, but we filmed on different sides of the country. I think the most fun one was Theater of Blood. Because, I was about 10 and we were living in London and we had a driver, and so one day my dad said, come out and visit us on the set. It's in this, old warehouse part of town. So we drove out and I got out of the car and it was like this really dilapidated area, and all of a sudden all of these completely freaky and scary toothless people with like scabs came running up to me and started pawing me and asking me for money. And I'm completely freaked out, and I'm looking for my mom, and I'm looking for my dad, and there's no one there. And then my dad comes sweeping out of the building. He's like, oh, leave her alone. That's my daughter, you filthy people. That's all that happened. It was years later that I found out those were the extras, and he'd asked them to do that. That was his sense of humor. So that's my favorite on-set story. Any other? Yes. Oh, yeah. Well, I was at summer camp and he was a big postcard sender. So he sent me a postcard in summer camp saying, oh, you'll never guess, I just did an episode of The Brady Bunch. I'm like, what? Without me there? I didn't get to meet, Peter Brady? Are you kidding? I didn't get to meet Jan? Oh my God, so he had them all sign the picture of them all going down the stairs, tutoria. It's like, what, you do a TV show and all I get is this damn picture, right? But I was very popular because of that. Yes?
One of your dad's few non-horror films later in his career was The Whales of August.
Yes.
I actually got to meet him at the premiere of that film in New York. Did he, with Betty Davis, Lillian Gish, and so, did he ever talk to you about his memories about making that film? Or is it
Yeah, it was a very, very difficult shoot. First of all, they were on some island in Maine. Second of all, Betty Davis, in robust health, was not an easy person. So in ill health, it was even worse, and she was difficult to work with. And both my dad and Lillian Gish were like two of the nicest people on the planet, so everybody was always sort of placating Betty Davis. But the other difficult part was that he was not feeling very well. It was before they diagnosed him with Parkinson's, so he didn't really know what was going on. He was very, very grateful for that part because it gave him an opportunity to play something outside of the horror genre and really do a beautiful job. So he was grateful for it, but it was a difficult shoot. And he had known Betty Davis since the 1930s when they did Elizabeth and Essex. So they got along really well, but he was a peacemaker a lot on that film. Are we good? Oh, yes.
What influenced him to become a horror actor in the first place? What made him?
He was a very, very handsome young man, and Hollywood, he was under contract to Universal. They wanted to cast him as a leading man, and that's not what he wanted to do. So he started, you can leave it down, they don't need to see me, he wanted to do villains. He wanted to be a character actor, he wanted to do villains. And then in the 50s, I'll tell you the story, he had the opportunity to sort of move into horror. And it was at a time, the time that Martin Landau was talking about, when the whole new kind of actor was coming up. James Dean and Steve McQueen, and a lot of the classically trained actors were not getting work. And very much like Bela Lugosi, he didn't want to go that route. He wanted to remain relevant and continue to work. So horror gave him an opportunity as sort of a classically trained actor to do those gothic roles. And it worked out beautifully. He was grateful.
Now, how tall is he? Because he always seems very, very tall and lanky.
Yes, 6'4", and not always lanky. If you look at him, or like in I think The Bribe, he liked to eat, so he could balloon up and balloon back down. So, but yes, he was 6'4". He was very tall for someone born in 1911. Yeah.
Okay, I do remember him on a TV show called Science Fiction Theater back in the mid-50s. What was his opinion of working on that kind of an anthology show?
First of all, this was a man. This gives me an excuse to launch into my dad's philosophy in life, and I'll morph from this question into my talk, if that's okay with all of y'all. you know, my dad was somebody who lived by one word, and that word was the word yes. He said yes. And so, you know, at the end of his life, some of the things he said yes to that other people might not have were the opportunity to do this weird little poem that somebody was calling a rap for a young actor, for a young musician who was breaking out of, you know, into his own career, and that ended up being Thriller. You know, he also said yes to an early film by a young animator at Disney with spiky hair who turned out to be Tim Burton, right? So in the early days of TV, you know, my dad literally, he didn't understand how anything technological worked. I mean, I read the instructions for everything in the house when I was 4 years old. He was clueless, right? But he knew that it was an industry driven by technology and technological changes. So he came home with a TV almost as soon as, you know, they were out on the market, because he understood that TV was the wave of the future. And I don't think he would at all be surprised at how TV, in a way, has outpaced the movies now in terms of creating great programming and great content, at least in this current moment in time. And so in the 50s, it was the same thing. And so he did Playhouse 90, he did the very first Playhouse 90, and he was very excited to be a part of anything that was trying something different, like an anthology show. So he was a man who said yes, and that will morph me into my little talk, which is that the title of this is called Master of Menace, Lover of Life. And I guarantee that most of you in this room know a lot more about the Master of Menace part than I do, because I am a self-confessed, as many of you know, non-horror fan. Do not throw things, please. I'm a non-horror fan because as the kid of a horror star, I didn't want to think of my dad as being a mean person, and he wasn't. And I didn't want to think of him as, you know, dipping people in wax or killing them, and worse than any of that, because really those were just other people, were, you know, the things that happened to my dad. My dad is tied with two other actors for dying the most in movies, which is, you know, that's an interesting claim to fame, I think. And so the Master of Menace part is how he made his living. But it's my opinion that the reason he's lasted, you know, he's gone 23 years now, 23 years earlier this week.
25th of October.
Yeah, 25th of October. Is because he loved life so much that it came through everything he did. He had this immense joy in life. And I'm going to play a little clip, hopefully, or we'll test our audio right now, that I think will at least bring to all of your hearts the feeling that many of us get, and many of you get, when you watch Vincent Price. So let's give it a go.